welcome to another episode of Behind the Dreamers. I'm Jennifer Loading, and we are talking to the achievers, the creators, the magic makers, and the dreamers. These are our friends, these are your friends, and they are living the extraordinary. All right, so here we are, another episode of Behind the Dreamers. I have an amazing guest coming on the show today. I think you guys are going to have such a fun time listening to him. He is a retired NYPD detective with lots of stories. I think he's going to have a lot of stuff to share with us today. But before we bring him on, I do want to do a quick welcome and shout out to our sponsors. So today's episode is brought to you by Walt Mills Photography. If you are a creator needing post-production, consultation, or promotion, Walt is your guy. Whether short films, YouTube films, photography work, or a new headshot, he can help you find a solution to match your needs. To learn more about Walt and his work, go to photosbywalt.com. We also want to give a shout out to Chris Clow of Upbeat Media Production. If you are in need of turnkey special events, Clow is your go-to. To learn more about him and his work, you want to go to upbeatmediapro.com. All right, that's always a mouthful I have to get out. So you'd think I'd have that thing memorized, but we're almost there, almost there. Anyways, all right, my guest today, Vic Ferrari, is a retired 20-year member of the New York City Police Department. With no formal training or Harvard degree, he wrote 4 behind-the-scenes books about his former employer with remarkable attention to detail combined with a sarcastic flair. Vic exposes the good, the bad, and the ugly of America's largest police department. So welcome to the show, Vic. So excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, sponsors, so much for having me on your show.
This is going to be so awesome. I'm excited to chat with you. You have such a fun personality, and I always love my New Yorker friends.
We're a little different.
Yeah, that's okay. You know, I had a guest on here on a show, I guess a couple weeks ago. And the first thing he asked me when he got on the show, he said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Texas." And he said, "Oh, I would have thought you were from New York." And I get told this all the time. And I think it's because I'm so dry, you know, and direct with everything. And I talk fast and I move fast. And so
I would have thought Jersey, but
I have friends in Jersey, but I'm not from there. All right. So I think let's open this thing up. So I guess what I want to start off is you're a retired NYPD officer. I want to know, I guess, first of all, why the police department? What brought you to that? Was that something from your childhood that you decided you wanted to do? Or did you just come out of school and you're like, hey, I think this sounds pretty cool. I'm going to do this.
No, I knew I wanted to become a cop before I went to school. I was 5 or 6 years old, and my mom used to take us to the movies around the corner from the police station. And when she'd taken us to see Herbie the Love Bug Part 2 or whatever, I'd run up to the police cars, and I was fascinated by the police cars, the cops, the way they interacted, their equipment, the gun. Every little boy wants one of those things. And by age 10, my friends and I used to sneak into the local post office and steal FBI wanted posters off the wall and go around the neighborhood conducting manhunts and our own little bullshit investigations. And it's like I knew what I wanted to do. Growing up in New York City, I mean, in the 70s and 80s, you had all these TV shows, cop and detective shows. I knew what I wanted to do at an early age. And my parents wanted me to go to college. I didn't want to go to college. And it was rough because I graduated from high school at 18, and my father's like, "Great, you want to be a cop in 2 years, but you're going to have to work." And I had so many bogus jobs. It was almost like catch me if you can. I'd go to work. I'd leave with one job and come back with another. My parents wanted to throw me out of the house, but everything worked out. By 20, I took the police exam, and by 21, I went into the police academy, where I had a wonderful 20-year career.
That's impressive. And I asked that question because I feel like some people do, like they know from the time they're a kid, this is what I want to do when I grow up. Like they know, right? And a lot of us were like, we have no idea. You know, when I was a kid, like I think about like where I'm at right now. And it's so funny because a lot of the things that I do now, I kind of did. Now, obviously we didn't have podcasts when we were children. We didn't have that. Right. But, I can remember pulling out my little cassette deck and putting my cassette tapes and recording myself on them, like recording things on there. Yeah. So it's so funny when I think about like where we are and where we end up. And I would say our paths are not linear, but if you kind of intersect all the dots of everything that you do, they sort of all come together. Right. So I'm impressed that you knew like from the beginning, you're like, hey, I want to be a cop, and wow, what a career you've had to be able to stick with that.
I was incredibly lucky. I mean, and I was a right fit for it. I mean, I also saw people think that becoming a cop or a police officer was a good idea. And then they got in there and they're like, this isn't what I want. And, they didn't do a 20-year career. They were out rather quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that too. Well, and I think people do that with a lot of things. When you agree, like they get in, they're like, this isn't, I thought this sounded good on, and in my head until I actually had to go put it into action and do it,
Well, I think back then, like in that time period, people would hang in there longer with things as opposed to like now it's kind of like the Dixie Cup generation. If you don't like something, you throw it out and you move on, But back then it was kind of a big deal. Like if you went through that whole process to become a cop, and it was a big process, long process to just quit, but I get that too. I mean, because bad things can happen when you're not sure of what you're doing.
Right, right. And I've never heard the Dixie Cup generation. Is that a New York thing or did I just miss that?
No, I just nowadays everything is plastic and just kind of gets discarded. In the old days, if something broke, you'd fix it or sit around the garage and you go, Dad, what are you going to do? I'm going to get to that. I'm going to fix that. Nowadays, it winds up in front of the house for the garbage man.
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing with you in any way. I agree with you. It's like so different now because I do think people do that. It's like it didn't work, they're done. Move on to the next thing, and there's none of that. Like, let me have the I don't know what you want to say. I want to say work ethic, maybe to keep pursuing, to figuring things out. Like sticking with something long enough to make sure it doesn't work before you say it doesn't work.
Well, we grew up before the internet and computers, right? So nowadays everything is instant gratification.
Right.
Whereas, if we wanted something, a job or, a class or something, I mean, there was a lot of legwork to do it. You just didn't go online and book something. You had to go to the library and figure it out. And then you had to mail something or go to like, a community building and file something.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was, we jumped through a lot of hoops.
Yeah, yeah. If you had to use a card catalog file at the library, you jumped through a lot of hoops.
Yeah.
We don't have that chat GPT AI now where you just punch in the words and it gives you all the context on everything you need to know. We didn't have all that. So interesting. So I guess what I'd like to know, and I'm sure our audience would probably like to know because, we got people listening from all over. Tell us what it was like working for the police department. You kind of told us a little bit about you, but what was it like working for them?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I had a wonderful 20-year career. I liked making arrests. I liked action. And the New York City Police Department, you can kind of be whatever you want to be or have whatever kind of career you want. If you want to become a supervisor, you study for the civil service exams and you get promoted and you move up the ladder. If you want to be a cop at a precinct and help people and drive around in circles for 20 years and, handle everything from lost dogs to missing people to a homicide, you can do that. I always liked action. I worked in the narcotics division and I was always a car guy. My neighborhood was like kind of the capital of car thieves in New York City. So I knew what to look for. I was always getting involved in car chases. I was always locking up car thieves. So eventually I gravitated to that and I became a detective in the auto crime division where I worked on chop shops, exporting stolen vehicles out of the country, anything to do with stolen cars.
Yeah, sounds kind of exciting. If you like a little bit of excitement.
Oh, it was a lot of excitement. I lived for it. Like I said, you could be as busy as you wanted, and then unfortunately, we had people that used to hide. Wasn't a big fan of those, but I mean, the department was that job was what you made it to be.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of jobs are, if you get to thinking about it, you see how you go in there, what you put into it, right? Like you get out what you put in. So I'm with you on that. So. Tell us maybe, because you were there for a while, like you probably have so many crazy stories. I'm sure you just have many. Tell us maybe something that you remember, maybe like the craziest thing that you can recall.
You got to point me in a direction. I'm like a jukebox. You got to go to that playlist and tell me what you want. You want scary? You want funny? You know what I mean? It's
Let's go with let's maybe do a funny one since we're positive here. Let's do a funny one. We don't want to scare everybody here.
All right. Well, this might interrupt one of the questions I think you might ask me, but this is funny. So you would think that cops are good at making personal decisions in their lives, right? You figure because they see all this stuff, they see all these scam artists, they see the bad in people, they would be immune, right, from making bad decisions in their life. So there was one guy that marries a woman from Colombia who used to dance before she got married. And one day she says to her husband, listen, Poppy is sick in Colombia, and I need $5,000 to go down there and, get him to a doctor. I mean, what her husband should have said was, well, we've got hospitals in the United States. We can bring him over here. She says, no, he never asked that. He gives her $5,000. She flies off to Colombia. She comes back about 3 weeks later with a boob job and wants a divorce. So, again, you would think that cops would see the writing on the wall. Another story, I haven't told this story in a while, but it's a funny one. Cops sometimes will follow the loudest voice in the locker room. And this is the early 90s. And all I'm hearing from all these cops is, oh my God, there's this accountant up in Scarsdale, and he's getting cops. But this is the 90s. Like, I was going to H&R Block, and I was getting back maybe $400 a year on my taxes, right? I mean, I wasn't making any. I don't even think I was at top pay. And I'm hearing these stories from all these cops where guys are getting back like $5,000, $10,000 30 years ago, and I'm like, how is this possible? And I'm like, no, he knows all the write-ups and all the write-offs and everything. I'm like, all right, I'll go see this guy, right? And I go up to see this guy. Oh, I'm talking, what a character. This could be something from a movie. I mean, the guy's eyes were bulging out of his head. He's sitting behind his desk. I mean, there's just folders of every cop in the Bronx, cops, firemen. He had the civil service thing sewn up, and he's hitting the calculator and stuff. And he goes, all right, Ferrari, we're at this pivotal fork in the road. He goes, you want me to put the pedal to the metal, or you want the blue plate special? And I'm looking at this guy, and I'm like, what? I go, listen, I just want to get my taxes done, and I don't want to get audited. I mean, I want to pay my taxes. I just, I maybe want to do a little better than H&R Block. He goes, oh, a quiet boy. All right. And he bangs me for, like, back then, I mean, H&R Block was like $60. This guy hits me for like $300, and I get back like maybe $600 for the year. And, I was pissed. I was like, oh, you're a moron. Why didn't you tell him? Blah, blah. I was like, I don't want any trouble. Well, the following year, the Internal Revenue Service raids this guy's office. They take file cabinets of stuff out of there, and then all the cops and firemen start getting audited. And I mean, it was a mess. I only went to him once, and I told him, don't screw around. But sometimes if you're a lemming, you're going to go right off the cliff. So it's just so funny how, like, cops sometimes are not immune, you know what I mean, to making bad personal decisions off duty.
Right. It's funny that you say that too, because I've often said that about people. Like, they'll be good at something that they do at helping somebody else do it, but not necessarily helping themselves do it. Right. Like an accountant, for instance, could be great at telling somebody else how to manage their books, but then when it comes to them doing their own books, they have no idea what they're doing. Right. Like, there's a lack of self-awareness. So no, that's great. That's great. So yeah, so you've had a lot. I had another question, and then I lost my train of thought. I was so listening to that. This is part of the perks of doing a podcast. You got to pay attention and think at the same time. It's a lot of work.
No, I get it.
Think about the next question. So you were at 9/11, am I correct? You were at this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. What was your experience of that? What was your role in that?
I was a detective. I was working uptown in a Bronx office. I had court that day, which was literally blocks from the World Trade Center. And I was supposed to go down with my sergeant, and probably would save my life was he was late. I was waiting around the office for him, because had we left at 7:15, we would have gotten downtown, parked, gotten something to eat, and we would have been down at the courthouse when the planes hit, or somewhere in the close proximity. And who knows? But he was running late. It was about, I guess, 8:30, 8:40. One of the cops from downstairs ran into our office and said, put on the television. And we were watching it unfold like everybody else. And after the second plane hit, they told us to get into uniform and stand by. And by about 1:30 in the afternoon, myself and everybody from my office was down there, and we were just walking around. And it was like something out of a horror movie, because everything was covered in dust. The closer you got to ground zero, the visibility became less, because sunlight couldn't really get through those particles. So it was like a weird twilight. Everything was covered in that, like, looked like volcanic ash. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of pairs of women's shoes all over the place, because you had all those women that worked in Wall Street and the financial district. When they were running the hell out of there, they just took off their shoes and ran barefoot.
Right.
They really didn't know what to do with us. Like, we were just kind of hanging around down there. And by about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, they dismissed us and said, get a good night's sleep, run your clothes through a washing machine because we don't know what this stuff is, and be back tomorrow at 5:30. And I did that for a week.
Wow. Yeah, it's so crazy. It feels like that was just like yesterday. And we all know where we were when that kind of unfolded. All of us know that, I think about that. It's like, that day I remember my middle child was a baby at that time. And I remember I was actually making calls, and I can tell you the person that I was even on the phone with at that moment when she said, have you turned the TV on? And I put it on. I was like, what? It's weird how everybody recalls that moment.
Well, it's adrenaline. When your adrenaline kicks in, it kind of tends to sear it into your memory. You remember something when you're excitable, you know what I mean? Or something happens that kind of throws you off. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about your books because you got all these stories. And so now you've written some books and you've done like 4 of them, correct?
6.
4 of which, 6? Okay.
Yeah. 4 of which are about the New York City Police Department, my experiences.
What are the other 2 that you wrote?
Confessions of a Catholic high school graduate. It's got a picture of a kid getting chased out of a confession booth. Yes, that really happened to me. No, I wasn't molested, but I was a little smart ass, and confessing one too many sins when you've got an angry priest can lead to a foot chase through a cathedral. It's just that book's about me growing up in the Bronx and the decisions I made and going to Catholic high school, which was the best thing in the world for me, although I didn't see it at the time. Kind of shaped me to who I am and kind of gave me the discipline to become a New York City police officer. And I wrote a comedy, which I don't have the book in front of me, but it's called Dickheads and Debauchery and Other Ingenious Ways to Die. And that's covers the ridiculous things people do to shorten their life expectancy.
Oh my goodness. How exciting. So what inspired this writing? Was this kind of like the reason I'm asking you this is because let me preface this and tell you, when I decided to start my podcast, it was like an overnight decision. It wasn't like this long process where I went, I think I'm going to do a podcast. It was just one day I'm in a parking lot, I'm having a conversation with somebody and I'm thinking, you know what? We should do a podcast. And then 2 weeks later, we launched a podcast. So I want to know, was this book writing thing, was this like a long thought out process, or did you just have like this inspired moment where you said, I'm going to write some books and talk about the New York Police Department?
Well, let me ask you a question quick. But you're doing the podcast now. Your friend isn't.
No.
The same thing happened with me. My friend and I decided we were going to write a book, and it was that comedy, Dickheads and Debauchery. And, it started off like Seinfeld, when Jerry and George want to get together every day and write a book about nothing, and they're not getting anything done. And the guy's a good friend of mine. And we would meet every week, and he's married with kids, and he really wasn't pulling his weight. And I said to him finally, after about a month of doing this, I'm like, dude, I'm just going to do this myself. It's like, he goes, yeah, I just don't have time. So he bowed out gracefully, and I put that book out. But what got me into writing the NYPD themed books was when I retired from the NYPD, I come down to Florida, bored out of my mind, and I get a job with a little police department down here in Florida. And it was different. It was like having a stroke and having to learn everything all over again. And it's so different, the policing from Florida and New York. And I just, I spent a half a day learning how to wrestle alligators. I'm like, I'm not doing this. So wrestling, duct tape in the trunk of the car. I'm like, can't we just shoot these things? Like, no, we don't want you shooting alligators. So I said, all right, I re-retired. And my friends and family said, you got all these good stories and funny stories about the New York City Police Department. You know how to tell a story. You should really write it down. I said, yeah, maybe I should. And I just started slowly but surely piecing stories together. And I got my first NYPD book out, and it started selling. And I wrote another one. And now, I'm up to 6 books. I'm finishing my 7th. It's kind of turned into like a little cottage industry for me.
Yeah, I'm impressed because I've written a book, and I know it's work to do that. I'm actually building out a program right now, and I actually feel like that's so much harder than my first book I wrote. I feel like it's like a bunch of books in one thing. You know what I mean? And I was telling my husband the other day, I said, this is going to be my last project. This is like my last big thing I'm going to do because I just don't even know if I have energy after that. This thing is so much work. So I'm impressed that you've written all these books, and good for you, and you're writing another one. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a process. You know what I mean? I try not to overwhelm myself. I know what I don't know. So when I got into writing, it's funny. My brother's getting into writing now too, and he's running into the same issues I had. I never write in chronological order. I think
Right.
that's suicide for a new author because you're not disciplined or trained enough.
Right.
So just pick a story that you know is going to be in that book that's going to be easy for you. And then what you do is sometimes when you're getting writer's block or it just doesn't seem to be coming out right, tell the story to somebody. Tell the story to a couple of people.
Yeah.
That will help you untwine and you'll be able to write it easier. And then one of the last things I do before I send my manuscript to an editor is I read it out loud. And I, find some time where I'm alone in the house. My Irish wolfhound thinks I'm crazy because I'm walking around the house like doing Shakespeare in the park, and I'm, going around reading this manuscript. But then I'm like, well, wait a minute. It sounded good reading it, but as I'm speaking it, this does not sound right. So
Right.
there's a lot of tricks of the trade I learned.
Yeah. Well, and I think you said something good because talking about not writing in chronological order, that has been exact. That's how I'm building my program. It's exactly it. I have to go around because there's some things that come to me. I say more freely, like they come to me without having to think near as much as other things. And sometimes I get boggled down on what is going to be the title of this particular section. And I get nothing done because I'm hung up on the title right now and it's not coming to me. So I found
that's the last thing, Jen, you're not
exactly.
alone. That's the last thing. That is the last thing I often figure out for a book.
Yep.
And the book blurb on the back. I know what the book is about. I wrote the damn thing, but for me to sit there, like you were just reading my autobiography, you know how long it took me to write that because it's about me, or I'm not. I guess I had to become a self promoter, but that's one of the most difficult things I struggle with: the title and about the author.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was the point I was saying, that sometimes it's easier just to focus on the areas that you can work on and that are coming to you, and then come back to those places that are like hinge moments or you're stuck on them. Right. And so that's one of the things, like in this program I'm building, I'm having to come up with different titles because I'm building videos and they're all different sections. Right. But interestingly, when I was writing my book, it was the outline that was the most difficult for me because I could just write. Like I just want to write. Right. And then it comes together as I'm starting to write, but then I'd have to go back. Now I've written the stuff out. Now I got to make the outline. You know what I mean? Like yeah. The outline just messed me up. So I think that's good advice. And I think when you're a creative person, sometimes you just got to roll with it,
I don't know how creative I am, but I know if I kept going down that path, I would have pulled all my hair out with a set of vice grips. So I just, it comes a point where you're wasting time.
Right.
And you've got to move on. So do something that needs to get done, and you can always come back to it.
Sure. All right. So who's the audience for these books? Young adults, everybody?
I find with my books, it's usually 35 and up, men and women, a lot of people in law enforcement, but it's also a lot of people that are fascinated with true crime. And I'm lucky because right now that's the hot thing with all these television shows, and CSI this and Blue Bloods that and Chicago PD. So I'm lucky enough. I had a career that most people find interesting and want to know more about. So, that's my sweet spot.
Yeah. Well, and it's crazy because I get on these stupid apps, right? Every once in a while I'm on the TikTok app and, they have the crime stuff in there and I see these darn stories and I'm like, oh, this is just so awful. And, for the people like you guys that had to be in that, like I'm looking at this and man, I just can't imagine having to look at this stuff like all the time. You know what I'm saying? I'm just, wow.
Well, you compartmentalize it. You can't, if you want to be effective at your job in that line of work, you have to be able to compartmentalize it and say, okay, this is really bad, but I can't run, I can't scream, I can't lose it. I have a job and I have to get through this. And you try not to take it home because, it's going to ruin your family life. It's like it's bad, it happened, and you just move on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, it's a job, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, good for you. That's so awesome. All right. So what have you learned about yourself in this process? I always like to ask this question on the Behind the Dreamers because I feel like this is the deep one.
I often get intimidated by something that looks like it's a monumental task, but I've learned if I just do it slowly and gradually and try not to overwhelm myself, I can pull it off. Like I didn't want it. When I got into writing these books, the last thing in the world I wanted to do was make YouTube videos and go put my face out there. But I realized, my books sell, but they're going to be a hell of a lot more successful if I can go out there and give people a reason to buy them. If I'm interesting, they're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to take a chance for $10 and buy this guy's paperback. Or if they hear a story from me on one of these shows. So, that was another thing as far as promoting the books. I wrote the books and it was like, great. If you want to sell them, you have to be able to put yourself out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's like with every business. And it's funny that you say that, because I feel like there's, I always talk about like the selling part for me is the easy part of business, because I'm the forward facing person. I can be the seller, the promoter, the closer. It's the back end stuff that I don't care for as much. And it's funny how we all have these strengths and weaknesses, right? Some people are really good on the back side. And when it comes to the marketing forward, and I'll be like, that part's easy. Like, I got that down. I can tell you how to do that part, and so we all have our strengths, just as we all have our weaknesses. We have to, and the good thing is knowing them.
Yeah, I think it goes back to our childhood, because I think back sometimes of what I used to like to do in school and what I hated doing in school, and it's just history repeating itself.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. But the funny thing about that, because I'm writing about this in my program, is that the difference is in school, we were told to keep focusing on those things that we weren't good at and do them anyways. Like, I still talk about geometry. I hated geometry. You and I have been out of school forever. We've been out of school forever. And to this day, I still have not figured out where geometry has benefited me in my life. Like, I hated it so badly. Algebra, I could do. All that other stuff I could do. We got to geometry? No. Spaces and all that. I'm like, how's that even math? I don't even know.
You're bringing up things that caused me a lot of pain in my teenage years. I always like to say I did 5.5 years of a 4-year sentence of Catholic high school because of summer school.
Oh, goodness.
Because there were some of those classes that you just mentioned that I just couldn't get through. And then at the end of it was a big racket. It was a scam. So, in the summertime, they put you and all the other morons that failed the class with a disinterested teacher. It's just about money. And then,
care about the
in a month. Yeah. I sat in a classroom for 6 months and couldn't figure this out. And in 1 month or 6 weeks, I'm going to be a crack shot, geometry or algebra or chemistry. Like, come on, stop.
It's so funny. I laugh about it now. I don't know. I'm sure somewhere, it's like engineering. Somewhere you use that stuff. Somebody's using it. I'm just not using it to talk on a podcast. I can tell you that. I'm not using it in podcasting or coaching. So I guess, but that's why I think it's funny. Like, we work on that stuff. We got to work so hard. And now, when I'm working with people, I always talk about delegating. Like, if you're not great at something, and you have the resources to be able to delegate some of that stuff out, allow somebody that really enjoys doing that to do that. If you're not enjoying it, then you're basically, I think you're killing your creativity, because you're stifling with all that other stuff you hate doing.
No, you're right. Exactly right.
Yeah. Well, good stuff. I'm excited. I need to check out your books for sure. I want to check some of them out for myself. So if our audience wants to find them, where do we want to send them?
So just go on Amazon, go to the book section, and just type in my name, Vic Ferrari, like the car. My book library will come up. All my books are $10, $2.99 ebook download. They have great covers like Grand Theft Auto, the NYPD's Auto Crime Division, or the NYPD's Flying Circus, Cops, Crime, and Chaos, and $2.99 ebook download. And if they want to get a hold of me, they can find me on Twitter and Instagram at VicFerrari50.
Very cool, Vic. This has been awesome. All right, I'm going to ask you a couple fun questions, because I almost forgot to do this. But I think we need to do this because I think it's fun.
Go for it.
You've got a great personality, so I think this will be a good one. All right, so I want to know, what's the first concert you ever went to?
ZZ Top.
That's good. I think I had somebody else say
Meadowlands.
Yeah.
Probably 1985.
ZZ Top. Okay, very cool. What's your favorite, because I know we just talked about food before we jumped on this show. What's your favorite guilty pleasure food?
Guilty pleasure? Oh, chocolate.
Chocolate. I like chocolate too. Hey, do you want to know something, Vic? I did not like chocolate for the first 47 years of my life. I did not like chocolate.
Sorry to hear that.
And then one day I woke up and I was like, I like dark chocolate. All of a sudden, I just like dark chocolate. Is that what weird or what? My mom was like, what is wrong with you? Like, are you possessed or what?
Listen, I'll tell you something not many people know. I never tried peanut butter until I was in my late 40s.
Oh my gosh, I love peanut butter.
And now I can't get enough of it.
By the spoon.
We didn't have it in the house, and I just never. Same as coffee. I didn't try coffee until I was in my early 40s. My old partner, we used to call him Cancer because he killed more people than cancer. He says, he goes, you should. He goes, I was drinking tea. He goes, what are you, friggin' English? I go, no. I says, but I don't like coffee. He goes, nobody. He goes, Vic, here's the secret. Nobody likes coffee. He goes, but it works. And now, now I'm a coffee,
That's so funny because I don't do coffee. I don't like coffee. I drink green tea. So I'm a tea drinker, but I love peanut butter, like Smucker's peanut butter by the spoon. I could eat that.
Yeah.
With chocolate, even better. It's good.
Oh, yeah.
Good. All right. One more question I want to ask you. This is one of my favorite questions.
I got time.
What is in your Amazon cart right now?
What is in my Amazon cart? You want to laugh? I think I'm buying a bunch of, I think in my Amazon author copies of my books, believe it or not, because I'm running dangerously low because you have to send them out and people ask for them. But yeah, my own books.
Hey, that's a smart purchase. Hey, I've got, no kidding. I looked at mine yesterday. There are so many things in my save in Amazon from my son. I'm like, I can't even. Like I went in there yesterday. I was like, what is in here? Like all in the safe, because he goes in there and he's on my account. So he goes in and puts all his stuff in there. And then I have to go, when I go to buy stuff, move it to the save pile. There's so much. And we got everything from like.
Well, you're lucky he's just not buying it. You're a good mother that you got a discipline that he'll put it in there and you'll review it. I've heard there was a guy in my office. Oh my God, that's a good story for a book. Like back when flat screens were really expensive and it took like a team of Egyptians to hang it on the wall. Like remember how heavy those things were? Something like a $3,000 flat screen showed up at his house and he's like, what the? And his kid just got a hold of his credit card and was ordering crap to the house. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to be careful because there are multiple cars in there sometimes, and my son will accidentally order on one. I'll be like, hey, did you just purchase something on the Amex? And he's like, oops. But he does. He's pretty good at putting it in there and letting me look at it. So I have to go through and filter because sometimes I'm like, dude, do we really need this right now? Like, we got enough water fountains in the house. How many more do we need for the cats, Let's rethink those fountains right now. Let's wait. Are we buying those on impulse or do we really need them today? So
I think it's impulse.
Yeah, I love that question. And I always wait. Some people tell me, they're like, I have nothing in my Amazon cart. I'm like, that's good because some people will be like, they just order, they put it in there, they order it, right? Like they're going to get it and they're done. And I'm like, nope, you haven't seen mine because I do that, but mine is loaded all the time. So, all right, good stuff, Vic. This has been fun. I've been so glad to have you on here. Congratulations on all your books. You're awesome. And your next one that you're writing about, do you want to tell us anything about this new one you're working on, or are you going to keep it a surprise until it's ready?
It's NYPD themed. I don't have a title. All my books there's no beginning, middle, end. Yeah. All my books, well, except Confessions of a Catholic High School Graduate, all my books just have a chapter with a theme and 4 or 5 stories about it. So in one of my books, there's a chapter called Crossing Over to the Dark Side. So that's got police corruption. Another one of my books has a chapter called Practical Jokers. And that's what cops pull jokes on each other. There's a story in there about me cutting open. I bought 100 crickets and dumped them in the backseat of a guy's car. Well, he gave me the wet ass. So, I mean, what was I supposed to do? I had no recourse. So each one of my books has stories, a chapter with funny stories. And I mean, there's dark stuff in there too, but it's a lot of things you wouldn't expect that goes on behind the scenes in the New York City Police Department.
Yeah, I'm excited. I want to get one. I'm excited to read it. And I think that's actually good because you can read a chapter. You know what I mean? Like I like books like that because you don't have to sit down and be like, I got to finish this whole thing because you're left hanging in the middle to get to the next chapter, right?
Yeah, no, you don't got to get too emotionally involved in it. It's a perfect book to pick up and go on a plane. You know what I mean? If you're going to the beach, there's just different chapters with different subtopics in it.
Yeah. So this new one's going to be more stories then? We got more coming?
Yeah, it's awesome. Behind the scenes of what goes on in the New York City Police Department. I'm writing about a story now. I locked up some kid that did a push-in robbery of this elderly woman. He looked like Tom Petty. And just the story of locking him up and having to take the old woman to grand jury. And then I got involved in another arrest and I got in trouble for making all this overtime. So it's just things you wouldn't expect that happen in police work.
Well, very cool. Well, you've got lots of stories. You were there for a long time. So congratulations on all your work and transferring that all into your books and stuff. Because I'm sure a lot of people, like you were talking earlier, a lot of people like reading that kind of stuff. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
It's been fun. All right. We do want to say, of course, to our listeners, if you enjoy our show, please be sure you check us out on iTunes, Facebook, hit that subscribe button on the YouTube so we can keep sharing all these awesome stories. And we want to leave you guys with a final parting thought. In order to live the extraordinary, you must start. And every start begins with a decision. You guys take care, be safe, be kind to one another. We will see you next time.